Thank you, Mark, and a big hello from London. Okay, so after the dramatic week last week, we have seen a glut of weekly patterns emerge and a surprising omission of some markets as well. To start with, let's look at the currencies, and we had dollar positive weekly key reversals in the following. The dollar index in US dollar against the Swiss franc. Now this was an unusual compound weekly key reversal up, as it was a weekly key reversal up last week after the previous week was also a weekly key reversal up. Then in US dollar CNY, the onshore Chinese yuan, both in the spots and in the 1 month NDF and 1 year NDF. Also in US dollar Danish krona, US dollar Thai baht, US dollar Romanian lei, US dollar Polish zloty, US dollar Taiwan dollar, US dollar Korean won, US dollar Bulgarian lev, US dollar Macedonian dinar, US dollar Malaysian ringgit, US dollar Singapore dollar, just in that case. And then in US dollar Nigerian naira 1 month NDF, also just. We also had similar dollar positive, currency negative weekly key reversals down in euro against the US dollar and in cable, that is sterling against the US dollar. However, what I found most interesting were two omissions from this list. There was no weekly key reversal up in US dollar Japanese yen. Instead, the market opted for the lesser outside week pattern, though we have seen an apparent orderly move higher in the dollar since last week. So maybe it was a bit of a slowing the market rather than stopping it. Likewise, there was no weekly key reversal up in US dollar Mexican peso. Here also, the market opted for a lesser outside week. And in my mind, I knew that Banxico, the Mexican central bank, had some very astute technical analysts on board as the move slowed the ascent of the dollar versus the Mexican peso, not stopped it, such that being as we are in the middle of this week, we are higher for the dollar than on Friday, but yet still within last week's range. There was also an aberration with a weekly key reversal down in US dollar against the South African rand of all things, but this week we have seen a corrective move up in the dollar there. We also had some interesting weekly patterns in the cross currencies with a weekly key reversal up in euro against the Romanian lei, if only just, which has seen a limited follow-on higher this week, as well as in Japanese yen, Chinese yuan, again if only just, and this week the start of a follow-on higher that has seemingly petered out today. We also had some weekly key reversals down in the crosses in euro against the Polish zloty, which has seen no follow-on lower, though the market is still within last week's range. Likewise, in Swiss franc Polish zloty, we had a weekly key reversal down last week, and neither a follow-on lower this week nor a reactionary move higher. Moving on now onto the cryptocurrencies, and we had weekly key reversals up last week in both Bitcoin and Ethereum, and as has been widely reported, we have seen follow-on moves higher in both of these this week to, in the case of Bitcoin, new all-time highs. Moving on again now to stock and stock index futures, and we had a weekly key reversal up in the Dow Jones index and also the E-mini S&P futures. Both these have seen again, as widely reported, the start of what appeared to be strong follow-on moves higher this week to new highs. But, and it is an important but yesterday's close on the Dow Jones and the E-mini S&P futures were below Friday's, thus seeing this week as a limited move higher with a question mark over the actions of last week. As a side note, for those of the TikTok generation, AMC stock of the US saw a weekly key reversal down last week, which this week saw no follow-on lower, rather the contrary, and moved back up, though still within last week's range so far. Now, one final point before I move on in China. In China last week saw a weekly key reversal up in the Shinex Composite Stock Index. This was an interesting one, as it was an immediate countering weekly key reversal up, overcoming the previous week's weekly key reversal down. And this week we have seen a satisfactory move higher as a follow-on to this. Okay, so there was one other financial that saw a weekly technical pattern last week, and that was a weekly key reversal down in Osaka JGB futures, which this week has also seen a nice follow-on lower. So, moving on to the commodities, and we had a weekly key reversal down in LME 3-month copper last week, which this week had a satisfactory follow-on lower. However, I should point out that the weekly key reversal down was only one of many bearish patterns that became evident last week. These included a 3-day bearish stick sandwich pattern and a small, what turned out to be bearish, descending scallop pattern. I detail all these in greater depth in my weekly LME metals technical analysis videos that were published yesterday. There were also weekly technical key reversals down last week in COMEX cobalt futures and in LME scrap Turkey. This week in cobalt, the market has made an immediate and quite significant reactionary move higher, setting us up for a possible immediate countering weekly key reversal up. Now we shall see how this develops next week. Whilst LME steel scrap Turkey, well, that had an interesting pattern last week. A compound weekly key reversal down in that we had a weekly key reversal down last week that was larger than the previous week's weekly key reversal down. This week, well, we have seen an immediate follow-on lower down towards prices last seen in the lows of September. Also, we had a weekly key reversal up in New York cotton futures last week, which has seen a strong reactionary move back down this week, pushing through last week's low yesterday and down to lows last seen in mid-September. We also had a weekly key reversal up last week in ICE Winnipeg Canola futures, which has not as yet seen a follow-through higher, though the market has remained within the topmost part of last week's range. This reluctance to try higher I put down to the proximity of the market to the dark blue neckline of an August to date reverse head and shoulders bottom pattern that is very close to breaking higher, but just hasn't done it yet. I cover this more fully in my weekly oilseeds and veg oils video commentary each Thursday. There was also a weekly key reversal up in EEX butter futures last week, if only just. This week has seen neither a follow-on higher nor a retracement lower in this one. Finally, we had a weekly key reversal up in ICE EUA carbon futures for December 2024 last week. This started to see a follow-on higher from this past Monday, as it also coincided with the breaking of a bright red neckline of a reverse head and shoulders pattern. But the market is finding it difficult moving up to the potential targets for both primary and secondary for this attempt higher, and has pulled back today within the main body of last week's actions. As always, I'm happy to answer any direct questions with anyone who's interested, and with that I'll finish this section from London. I hope that you found these comments useful.
Thank you for listening. This weekly broadcast gives the essential market patterns and consequences. Please be aware of the risk disclaimer posted both at the front and at the back of this broadcast. Copyright is Eddie Topic and ADM Investor Service International Limited. And here comes the final important bit.